Darjeeling stood sad and silent as it bid farewell to its first bishop, Right Reverend. People of Darjeeling had seen him, known him, and loved him. Now they watched tearfully the cortege with its mortal remains moving down the misty winding road. All shops and offices in Darjeeling town were closed as a mark of respect. People from all walks of life, caste and creed thronged the streets of Darjeeling to have a last look at their beloved bishop, friend, philosopher, and guide. Eric Benjamin was the eldest of 11 children born to Benjamin Town and Catherine. He belonged to the Town tribe. As the eldest in the family, he was much admired by his siblings, especially Anthony Benjamin, his brother, Isabel, his sister, and her husband, Mr. Claudius Johnson. They share their fond memories and hilarious incidences from the life of their beloved Raju.
जब पनि मैले उसलाई सम्हाल्न देख्थेँ कि मलाई मनमा त्यस्तो भइरहेको थियो नाउ समथिङ माई फ्यामिली दाजुभाइ दिदीबहिनी सबैको इभन गाउँमै पनि केही हुन्छ कि भन्ने देखेँ त्यस्तो किसिमको क्या मलाई हुन्थ्यो अनि अहिले धेरै जब मैले उसलाई देख्छु हुन्छ यति केयरफुल धेरै यस्तो योवाला छ क्या अहिले पनि फिजिकली इज नट विथ अस नाउ but he's always in our heart and always inspiring, praying for us. अनि म जहिले पनि जे पनि मेरो घरमा दुःख सुख रोग बिमार जे पनि हुन्छ म चाहिँ हाम्रो लागि प्रार्थना गरिदिनुहोस् न भन्छु दाजु हाम्रो लागि प्रार्थना गरिदिनुहोस् तपाईँको प्रार्थनाको जरुरत छ यस्तो समयमा हामी पार गर्दैछौँ तपाईँले हाम्रो लागि प्रार्थना गरिदिनुहोस् चाहिँ सधैँ नै भन्छु क्या कि अनि पार गर्नुहुन्छ उसले जसरी हामीले सानो हुँदाखेरि रोहित भएर विश्वास भएर डायसिसको लागि आफ्नो जीवन अर्पण गर्दाखेरि हामीलाई छोडेको थियो तर परमेश्वरको हातमा छोडेको थियो अघि होइन अनि मलाई अहिले त्यस्तो लाग्छ उयो नै हामीलाई सधैँ राख्छ माथिबाट हिज अलवेज इन आवर हार्ट अलवेज फिजिकली इज नट देयर बट इज इन आवर हार्ट
Your CEO mentally, you'll transfer transfer certificate. You know transfer certificate. Hotel should have the head of Pascal Yardanian order, hotel should have founder. I'm telling you, I get the money to Tena, get much of the way. एकदम जोड़ा जोड़ा क्या करना चाहता है कि तीन जन हम स्टार्ट करें पुलिस मो रस मार्च
अनि म
कहीं जो के था कहीं जो छुट्टा करके हम जोड़ा दूसरे जन ये लोग मेरे जोड़ा से और सब मार्च करते हो क्या कहते हैं गिरना हम लोग पढ़ने के एक जोड़ा और बोले तो घर में खाना पकाने पड़ते हैं हो त्यस्तो पनि थियो हामी त्यसो गर्नु त्यसो मिलेछ नि त गिफ्ट गर्नुपर्ने दुईजना बस्नुपर्ने घरमा काम गर्नुपर्ने त्यस्तो भएको काम
माथि माथि हुनुहुन्थ्यो होइन रोगी हुनुहुन्थ्यो तपाईँले तपाईँ अलिकति आराम गर्नुहोस् है यसरी हुँदैन साह्रै बेसी गर्नुहुन्छ हो भन्दाखेरि होइन आमा आराम त माथि गएर मात्रै भन्नुहुन्थ्यो हो अनि कोही कोही बेला अलिकति हाम्रो अरू डिस्कसन पनि हुन्थ्यो हामीले दाजु बिसप स्वामी एकदम इज्जत कहिले पनि त्यस्तो प्रकारले बोल्दिनँ थिएँ म चाहिँ सिधा सिधा दाजु बोल्नुको मात्रै हो कहिले पनि बिसप स्वामी भनेर बोलेको पनि मैले पनि दाजु भनेर जुन आमाको कोखबाट बिसप स्वामी जन्माउनु भयो है दार्जिलिङ डायसिसको सबभन्दा पहिलो बिसप स्थापक पनि हुनुहुन्थ्यो होइन उहाँकै आमाको त्यही कोखबाट मैले पनि जन्म लिएको चाहिँ मलाई एकदम ठुलो गर्व लाग्छ खुसी लाग्छ हो अनि परमेश्वरलाई धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद दिनु मन लाग्छ
In 1938, Eric Benjamin entered the People's Seminary in Kandy, Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, to pursue his philosophical and theological studies. He was ordained a priest on 24th August 1945 and celebrated his first Mass on the following day. His fervent prayer to God on his ordination day was, O good Jesus, grant me to be a priest after thy heart. The next 5 decades of his priestly life was a fulfillment of that prayer. He immersed himself in pastoral life, visiting his flock with the heart of a good shepherd and the smell of the sheep. Young Father Eric's special apostolates were the sodalities, the choir, and the altar boys. In May 1955, he was appointed domestic prelate and was accorded the title Monsignor. A proud mother stood beside her son, the newly appointed Monsignor Eric Benjamin. October 7, 1960 was a momentous day for Darjeeling. Monsignor Eric Benjamin was consecrated Bishop of Darjeeling by His Grace Monsignor Michael Gonze, Metropolitan Archbishop of Malta, together with Monsignor Leo Tegga, Bishop-elect of Dunga. Both Bishop Benjamin of Darjeeling and Bishop Leo Tegga of Dunga proceeded to Rome to attend the Second Vatican Council. On his way to Darjeeling, as a newly consecrated bishop, he stopped at Salesian College and told the fathers and brothers, "Up to now, you were told you can stay in Goravari, provided you do not go out. Now I tell you, you can stay in Goravari, provided you go out." He entrusted the entire Balasan Valley to the pastoral care of the Salesians of Don Bosco. Father Joseph Verzotto of happy memory recalled, when Bishop Eric Benjamin, repeating gestures of Vatican II, opened the apostolic windows of the House of Sonada, the community erupted in joy. In his message to the Golden Jubilee souvenir of Salesian College, Bishop Eric, expressing his deep appreciation, wrote the following: "Let the old Goravari brewery of history, now buried under the new beautiful community chapel, continue to preserve its feast for a far nobler cause, the growth of Christ's kingdom around us." He was truly a man of God. Former Archbishop Henry D'Souza of Kolkata had this to say about Bishop Eric Benjamin. While he was president of the Regional Bishops' Council of Bengal, he was known for his zeal to evangelize and to keep the topic of evangelization in the perspective of planning. Bishop Eric Benjamin, a visionary missionary, was a person of gigantic head with a genuine shepherd's heart who loved his flock till his last breath. Says Sister Adele Rai, Bishop Eric was thought of as a great friend of the Loreto sisters. The senior sisters always spoke of him as being a man of the people who in his young days as a priest visited his parishioners on horseback. Mother Anunziata frequently reminded us, and very proudly so, that she knew him as a young priest and that he often came to what was known as the priest's parlor to work quietly there. And Devon spoke of his wisdom, his knowledge of the hills, and his interaction with the people. No one was excluded. Sister Teresa McGlinchey remembers him as friendly and informed bishop, unheard of in Ireland. Her memory of him is of a man of deep faith, a very homely person, with a very great sense of humor, remarkable for his thoughtfulness and kindness to one and all. Father Edgar Peter Burns, SJ of Heavenhall, Darjeeling, and former VJ of the diocese, once said, "Among all the bishops of the world, there will be none more missionary and spiritual than him. And he was an exemplary good shepherd like Christ. Bishop loved people of all religious faiths and was able to mix with them." Father Burns added, "For Archbishop Thomas D'Souza of Kolkata, Bishop Eric was a great pastor, always cheerful and a man for the people. The bishop just loves his people and wants to be close to them." Even when his health was failing him and was advised to rest, he insisted on going to visit his people. On one of his last trips, he had to be carried in a chair up a hilly remote area of the diocese where normal transport was impossible. In spite of his failing health, Bishop Eric seriously attended to his pastoral duties, which finally hastened his death. A day before his 74th birthday, he passed away at St. Teresa's Parish Presbytery, Kalimpong, on 12th May 1994, following a massive cardiac arrest. Salesian College. A history that speaks today has this to say about Bishop Eric Benjamin. He was one of the great friends of Salesian College. He visited the college as often as he could and was immensely pleased to have the Salesian in his diocese. He helped and encouraged them in the pastoral work. His vision and charisma has a powerful impact not only on the diocese of Darjeeling, but also on the entire region. He set the diocese of Darjeeling on a firm foundation, and his legacy continues.
We proceed towards the memorial lecture by Father Dr. Samuel Lecture. Father Dr. Samuel Lecture is the Vicar General of the Catholic Diocese of Darjeeling and Sikkim. He is also the Director of Anutyalaya, the social service wing of the diocese. He hails from St. Patrick's Church, Kalimpong. He has served institutions like St. Augustine's School in Kalimpong and was Dean of Philosophy in Morning Star College, Kolkata. He has worked in 6 parishes of the Diocese of Darjeeling. He was Director of Divyavani Pastoral Center. He holds a doctorate in philosophy and is an authority on the lecture religious text Namtho Namthars. He is a guest lecturer to many institutions. We are honored and privileged to have Father Dr. Lecture deliver the first Bishop Eric Benjamin Memorial Lecture 2022 on the topic Understanding Liberation, Tashiting Namtho Namthar Perspective. Over to you, Father.
Honorable Chief Guest, Stephen Lecture, Dr. Anthony Tommy Augustine, Rector, Salesian College, Dr. James Chaplow, Rector of Salesian Law Institute, Honorable HODs, member of staff members of the college, our seminary professors, my dear family members of the Bishop Eric Benjamin, and my dear students. Good morning to one and all. Thank you so much for inviting me to this first lecture series, memorial lecture series in memory of late Bishop Eric Benjamin. At the outset, I would like to thank my Bishop Stephen, who allowed me and encouraged me to do my PhD on Namtho Namthars. And this particular lecture, which I am dedicating to late Bishop Eric Benjamin, is a kind of modified abstract of my research paper. Understanding Liberation, Tashiting Namtho Namthar Perspective. Introduction. From the very moment of his ordination as a priest, Right Reverend Eric Benjamin, the first bishop of the Diocese of Darjeeling, had to experience various transitions taking place around him. Rapidly unfolding events were influencing his ministry, shaping his responses accordingly. The country, India, was getting ready for a great political liberation at the time he was ordained a priest on 24th August 1945. 2 years later, in 1947, insofar as the lives of the displaced communities were concerned, all the socio-political happenings across the border and within the country affected his ministry in various ways. 17 years into his active pastoral ministry, another great event unveiled in his life as he was appointed the first bishop of the newly erected Diocese of Darjeeling by Holy Father Pope John 23rd, 9 August 1962. Soon after his consecration as the first bishop of Darjeeling and took charge of the newly erected diocese and the faithful therein, the Second Vatican Council was convened in Rome on 11th October 1962. The Universal Church was busy liberating herself from years of institutionalization and trying to reorient itself, reading and responding to the signs of time. The young bishop was indirectly part of this self-liberating exercise of the Universal Church because he was presenting the Universal Church locally and representing the local church of Darjeeling Diocese universally. Thus, as a priest and a bishop who ministered to people at pre-Vatican and post-Vatican times, he was a symbol of transition even ecclesiastically. He had to instill the spirit of new way of being the church brought by the Council of Vatican II in all the faithful and share the same with the people outside the church. He witnessed the emergence of liberation theology in the 70s and its repercussion in the universal and local churches, including in his own diocese. Evolving philosophy of liberation and the theology of liberation in the church implied metanoia of hearts, especially in the leaders of the church universally. Hence, rapidly changing theoretical substratum of the church supported and shaped the functioning and thinking of the first bishop in his diocese, which needed multi-pronged liberation. In one word, his priestly and episcopal ministries were administered in the socio-religio-political milieu prevalent around him. There were not only ministries, but liberative involvements in the lives of people he served with dedication and love till he returned to his eternal reward. His death while still serving the people as a shepherd speaks volumes. Almost chastising me publicly for my indifference to the religio-cultural and socio-political conditions of the people in general, but lectures in particular, he had expressed in 1988. Then I was a young seminarian. Quote, please work for the liberation of the lectures. They are kept as anthropological specimens by the government, especially in the North Sikkim, unquote. In response to his instruction given at that time, this paper, Understanding Liberation, Tashiting Namtu Namta Perspective, is being dedicated to his fond memory in order to commemorate his 28th death anniversary today. A fitting tribute to one of the great souls of our time who actually believed in indispensability of liberative involvement of the leader for holistic development of the people. Now, My paper is on Namto Namtar, and now I have just one introduction about Namto Namtar, and one of the personalities is Tasiting Namto Namtar, so I have a small introduction before the paper. Tasiting is one of the divine personalities in Tasiting Namto Namtar, around whom socio-political, religio-cultural reflections of the lecture community in particular are built. Secondly, Namto Namtas of the lectures are the sacred scriptures which include religious, historical and pseudo-historical writings of great significance of the community. These writings of the lectures have great philosophical and theological potentialities. One of the concepts the writers of the Namto Namtas have tried to understand is liberation, or in lecture, Athor. I'm skipping the terminological clarifications, but I'm going straight away to the philosophical reflection on liberation as presented by Namto Namtar. Liberation understood in Tasiting Namto Namtar Sunam Chiring version. Tasiting Namto Namtar, the lectures have different verses. We have considered Padma Sri Sunam Chiring version for our presentation today. Hence, we call it Tasiting Namto Namtar Sunam Chiring version and abbreviated as TNT STV. In the TNT STV, Rum Tasiting, the personification of the legion of rooms or gods, has been presented as the personified truth or Pangli Tunsong Rum. Pangli Tunsong truth, or Pangli Tunsong in lecture is truth, and Pangli Tunsong Rum, that is true God, are understood and interpreted synonymously. Thus, Tasiting is shown as the divine truth. Role of a liberator is performed by Tasiting, who involves himself in liberating the world. Total involvement of the liberator is indispensable for the liberation of the oppressed and the bondage. Narrative unfolds that the oppressed or bondage will be liberated only then when the two meet. Liberation actualizes only when the searcher or the devotee encounters Pangli Tunsong Rum through knowledge and personal experience of the divine. The whole being of the searcher or devotee, mediated through senses, heart and mind, play vital role in encountering and experiencing the liberator, the Pangli Tunsong Rum. In this way, the truth about the Pangli Tunsong Rum can be experienced by coming to know Pangli Tunsong, or the truth. As an object of one's mind, heart and senses, Pangli Tunsong Rum, or God, can be experienced in one's mind, heart and senses too. This will lead to personal experience of the divine, the Pangli Tunsong Rum. This experience gives the searcher or the devotee liberating experience. Truth or Pangli Tunsong is the key entry point. However, the question arises as to how to access this truth, the source of liberation. How is liberation delivered to those who are in need of it? What is the responsibility of the one who has attained liberation? In order to address these questions, the Tasiting Namto Namtar holds that any discussion on liberation implies liberation from bondage or bondages. It is taken for granted that bondages of various kinds cause sufferings in the lives of people. The sources of bondage in life could be material or spiritual. Any kind of excess or paucity is seen as a cause of bondage. The lecture Namto Namtas hold that sufferings in the lives of people are unavoidable. Thus, suffering is experienced on different levels of life. Every living being strives for freedom from sufferings of various kinds. liberation from suffering can be an immediate or mediated experience. The latter term, Pahupani, meaning harmful epidemic, has been used metaphorically to express the dehumanizing sufferings. This Pahupani has been projected as capable of inflicting both spiritual and physical sufferings on the people, including all other living beings. The natural concerns of Tamil realms, the gods, therefore, are to keep humans safe from the clutches of Pahupani, the evil power, which challenges the powers of Tamil realm in the lives of people. In order to counter these challenges posed by the presence of suffering, the knowledge and experience of the truth as effective antidotes have been suggested in the lecture Ramjanamthas. Truth in all forms is thus one of the liberating factors of the gods or the realms. Various narratives in the Lectanamtanamthas describe how, in order to defeat the evil forces, the liberating powers of the realms or gods are passed on to the world through different ages. This is the primordial way of understanding the idea of liberation according to the Lectanamtanamthas. Liberation from the multifaceted sufferings of the world. The existence of multifaceted sufferings in the world, in the lives of people in it, and in other beings are taken for granted in the TNT STV. Every kind of suffering deserves some response. According to the TNT STV, the right form of response to any kind of suffering is the involved liberation. This is a kind of liberating act which calls for an active involvement of the liberator or liberators in the lives of those who are suffering. Thus, the TNTSTV proposes a kind of dynamic and active form of liberation where the liberator is not passive. It calls for a liberating action delivered dynamically. This liberative act has to be extended compassionately. The underscoring message throughout this narrative is that both the sinner and the sinned against need to be liberated. Thus, Rum comes to this world to deliver the transgressors who are in need of liberation. This necessitates divine intervention. The divine intervention is not for destruction and annihilation of the offender, but for his or her freedom from ignorance, which leads the person to sin. The moment of liberation begins as the sinner realizes his or her mistakes made by going against the undefeatable power and presence of Rum. Each time Rum, the sitting, suffers and survives death in the hands of the people who misunderstand and condemn him, they get converted dramatically by coming to know his true identity as Rum. In order to present this understanding of the Lectanamtanamthas, we shall survey the textual content of TNT STV to some extent. 2.1.1 Deconstruction of the text of TNT STV involving Rum in the suffering world. Textual journey of the TNT STV appears very predictable as far as its plots are concerned. Each plot involves the negative thesis, that is, there is sin. The positive antithesis says there is compassionate intervention of God. And the affirmative synthesis, sinner says, forgive us, we have sinned against you without knowing that you are Rum or God. With this, each episode of liberation comes to its completion. In other words, the plot is built on the schema. There is a problem, The problem is approached to make a solution. The solution brings joy, starting life all anew. The main protagonist in the TNTSTV is Ram Taseti. He is the divine representative in this sinful world. He visits this world several times under different pretexts. He gets himself involved in the act of liberating ignorant people. He becomes everything to everybody in order to save and liberate all living beings. He relates with all the rank and file of this world and liberates them. As the representative of Kamli Ram, he is the voice of Ram against the oppressive forces in the world, especially against the sinful kings and queens. Even his matrimonial alliances are entered into only to liberate the suffering beings in this world. The TNTSTV 221 to 16 narrate the first extraordinary birth of Ram Taseti as the miraculous son of Vimsuki, a virgin girl. While she's busy weaving cloth, from the sky gods drop Ram Taseti into her lap in the form of a hailstone filled with their powers. Startled, she swallows that and conceives him. The Ram is taken to heaven when he's just 9 years old. This narrative appears to assert the theory of the divine origin of Ram Taseti, the involving God. The TNTSTV 217 states that Ram Taseti married a woman named Dharmik Rupandi in heaven when he reached the marriageable age. He sees the evil kings and queens ruling the world and begins his salvific work. He overpowers the evil agents, the evil kings, queens, and their subjects, and brings them back to the path of virtue. TNTSTV 132. The evil enters the world through the misrule of the rulers and the misadventure of the learners. On his visit to the world, Ram Taseti notices the sufferings of the people in the hands of power-abusing evil kings and queens who oppress and enslave the weaklings of this world. Another cause of suffering is the presence of Dutt Makam Tutaka, a scholar turned evil. In TNTSTV 100 to 206, two well-intentioned monks from Tibet come to India to learn wisdom. And one of them, after failing to gain wisdom, ends up becoming an evil demon, Dutt Makam Tutaka, and begin oppressing everybody. The excessive oppression necessitates the intervention of the liberator. This narrative supports the saying, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. It can be destructive. The TNTSTV 221 to 23 state, the rule of Ram was like the mustard seed, and the rule of Mum, or the devil, or the evil, was like a flame. The big and the tall oppressed and enslaved the small and weak in this world. 2.1.2, liberation involves healing. TNTSTV 285 following mentions that Ram Taseti as a small boy of 8 years, sitting on a flower on the bank of a river, meets the blind king Imrapati with the purpose of liberating him from his sinful life. This encounter causes both physical and spiritual healing in the king's life. Metaphorically viewed, the scene with both the eyes would mean complete inner healing that was taking place in the life of the king Imrapati from the time he started moving towards Ram Taseti, who had appeared disguised as a small boy of 8 years sitting on a flower. The healing of the king shows that when one moves towards the source of truth, Kamli Kansong Ram, he or she begins to see. The encounter with the little Ram Taseti enables the king to see with both his eyes. Living as the adopted son of the king, Ram Taseti teaches them about the importance of Kumzu, the heavenly ancestral home of the Lepchas, to which each will return once the earthly days are over. He says, quote, "The one who recognizes the poor and the suffering finds the path leading to the ancestors," unquote. "The one who is compassionate finds out the door to the Kunzul." Thus, the path of compassion for the poor and suffering becomes the unavoidable requirement for attaining liberation. Intending to liberate the king from his ignorant imaginations, Rinpoche Tshering gives us a series of visions. The first vision is that of fishes gasping for want of water and oxygen. It reflects how many beings suffer and pant for justice and compassion in the oppressive hands of evil-hearted kings or rulers. Intended to heal the king from his insensitivity of heart, this vision facilitates an attitudinal change in the heart of the king. In the second vision, Patrice and the crow are seen chasing each other around the thorny bush. The thorny bush represents the sinful kingdom. The Patrice, Rinpoche Tshering, and the crow symbolizes the king. This is intended to heal the king from his mental illusions because, being childless and having found this young boy, Rinpoche Tshering, the king begins cherishing the idea of adopting him as his own son. Rinpoche Tshering thought, if I didn't incarnate in the form of a small boy of 8 years, I wouldn't have been able to overpower this king Imranpati, so filled with sin. Liberated involvement demands detachment. Filled with the spirit of salvific mission, Rinpoche Tshering refuses even to marry. Instead, he very committedly carries out his liberative action, guided by the voice of the invisible God. The plots get complicated when the liberator feels the need to liberate himself before liberating others. The TNTS-TV 614-25 presents a plot which betrays all rationality and logic. Rinpoche Tshering kills the son of a minister, Nyakut, with a pebble while trying to kill a fly sitting on his face. The narrator gives another spin to it, saying that Rinpoche Tshering had to do this silly thing in order to escape the attachment to his family life for the sake of his higher mission. TNTS TV 658-89 shows that it is very difficult to liberate oneself from various attachments before becoming a liberator of others. He has to do something unpleasant and glaringly unethical for the sake of the higher mission. He tries to point out that Rin can write straight with crooked lines. The liberator liberates himself from undue attachment before going out to liberate those who are bondless. Detachment needed in order to experience liberation. Prepare us for accepting our finitude, our limitations. Rinpoche Tshering wasn't ready to marry because he thought that a married life would be a hindrance like a jewel soiled with mud. He tells the king father, he tells that in his former life he was unjustly killed by people after being blamed unjustly of killing someone, and the one who lied caused Rinpoche Tsering's death was this boy who had died today. Do I have some time? Or should I cut it? All right. I'm omitting a certain portion, compromise with irrationality for liberation, detachment from familiar ties for liberation, and the few things. And I'm going straight away to 3.3. Rinpoche Tshering asks, The omniscient teacher and source of knowledge liberates the ones in ignorance from their ignorance, imparts to the people the knowledge of the cosmos, and teaches them everything about the origin of the sun and stars. As a healer, he teaches a woman knowledge of all kinds of medicines for various illnesses. As a learned cosmologist would do, he gives knowledge to the cosmos to an old man. Representing God of small things, God with feelings. God of small things, representing comes across a woman busy trying to repair a leaking pot which she needs for cooking food, and helps her. Thus, representing is seen as God for all human engagements. Representing teacher of letter language. One day representing meets two letter going down to meet Dumont, or hereditary Bungting or Bongting or Bimbong Ketamlang, in order to learn about Bongting from him, Bongtingism from him, he grabs the opportunity and teaches them that the Bongtingism is transmitted hereditarily and not by learning. Ram Tseting liberation from that also I conclude. Perhaps I've got beyond time, and it is philosophically little difficult and contextually interpreted. I will just avoid the remaining, and I am going to the conclusion. Representing the liberator underwent the process of self-liberation in order to liberate the world. So also, we can see from the very beginning of the ministry, of his ministry, late Bishop Eric Benjamin has undergone transformations of various kinds, which prophesied, I will take rest only in heaven. Rightly so, he died while he was still busy liberating people from various bondages, psycho-spiritual, socio-economical, and linguistic as well. Liberated as he is, in every sense of the word, he remains very dear to all of us, as Ram Tseting remains in every liberated lecture heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father, for taking time to prepare to deliver the lecture. It was surely an enlightening one. We now have the choir presented by the Salesian Brothers. I now invite our chief guest, Reverend Bishop Stephen Lecture, to deliver his message.
Dear Father Dr. Agustin, Rector of St. College, dear Father Dr. James Sacco, Rector of St. Philosophic, all the staff members, and today's special guest, our beloved family members of late Bishop Eric Benjamin, Mr. Anthony Benjamin. I was very happy to see him today, and our beloved Isabel Benson, and our dear Sir Robert Benjamin, and all of the family members, and my dear students. First and foremost, my heart bubbles with joy and gratitude towards Salesian College to keep this late Bishop Eric Benjamin Memorial Lecture. For me, is the greatest joy to remember him. Today is, in fact, 28th anniversary of our late Bishop Eric Benjamin. This morning, I offered Mass in the cathedral where his tomb is there. And speaking always from the tomb, here am I. And I feel he's loving us every day. We had a beautiful Mass this morning. To remember him, a person like him, I would say is an act of civilization. Because those educationists, those religious leaders, and those pastors whose heart is always towards the people, I call them pillar of the society. They are the one who build the society. To remember them again and again is to learn beautiful things from these great people. And this is what is happening today. Yesterday, हामीले कुनै पनि महान व्यक्तिको स्मरण गरिरहनु, उनीहरूको लाइफबाट धेरै धेरै कुराहरू सिक्न सक्छौँ, प्रभावित हुन सक्छौँ, इन्स्पायर हुन सक्छौँ आफ्नो जीवनलाई अगाडि बढाउनको निम्ति। त्यसै कारण यो फोरम जुन चाहिँ छ एउटा कलेजको फोरम, अनि यसमा भविष्य निर्माण गर्ने महान महान व्यक्तिहरू यही नै हुनुहुन्छ। मेबी टुडेज मेमोरियल सर्भिसबाट चाहिँ धेरैजना तपाईहरु प्रभावित भएर यस I am somebody, I can do something, I will do it भनेर इन्स्पिरेसन ड्र हुन्छ नै भन्ने मलाई आत्मविश्वास छ. Thanks to Salesian College for organizing a beautiful ceremony like this. Darjeeling Hills is blessed. Darjeeling Hills is blessed, having a great education institution like Salesian College. I know what this college is doing. They are not only giving formal education here, but they are trying to explore all the beautiful things that we have in our culture. We have different cultures that we have. About them, they have done a little research here. Research work is going on. Several books have been published. And I feel so great. Our education institution, something like this, doing a marvelous work to give something to the society, a light to the society. By studying, we come to know ourselves. राईको बारेमा, तामाङको बारेमा, लेप्चाको बारेमा, थुप्रै कल्चरको बारेमा यो एजुकेसन इन्स्टिट्युटबाट रिसर्च भइरहेको म देख्दछु. Father George, Dr. Tabadil, a very creative man, I find him. I think he never sleeps. He loves Darjeeling, he loves Darjeeling people, and so also all other fathers here. Father Tommy Augustine, एसियाको 4थो नम्बरमा आउँछ. उहाँले BT युनिभर्सिटीबाट बुद्धिज्ममा डक्टरेट गरेका हुन्. Can you imagine, by being one Catholic priest doing doctorate in Buddhism? We may not know him. Very nice. So पनि एसियामा 8 उहाँको नाम आउँछ. यस्तो व्यक्ति सलेसियन कलेजमा भएर यति डरलाग्दो भन्नु त राम्रो छ, यति प्रभावित इन्फ्लुएन्सियल सबलाई एजुकेट गर्ने प्रकारको यो सिस्टम ल्याएको छ यो कलेजले. अनि साथसाथै स्पिरिचुअलिटीको कुरा गर्दै थियो प्रोफेसर फादर सामरले. स्पिरिचुअलिटीको कुरा ल्याउनु भयो, आध्यात्मिकताको कुरा ल्याउनु भयो. त्यो सबै रिलिजनमा स्पिरिचुअलिटी हुन्छ. कुनै पनि त्यस्तो रिलिजन छैन विदाउट ह्याभिङ स्पिरिचुअलिटी, आध्यात्मिकता. अनि त्यही आध्यात्मिकताले सबै धर्मलाई एक गराएको हुन्छ. Spirituality is the one point that unites all the religion. एकतामा ल्याउँछ नि. अनि त्यो रिसर्च पनि यहाँ भइरहेको छ. कतिवटा किताब छापिसकेको छ. अनि यसमा म अति नै खुसी छु. And together with you, my dear students, I want to express sincere gratitude to the Salesian fathers here doing all these things for the progress of the hill people. Let us give them a big hand. Thank you. म आफै लेप्चा भएको हुनाले म आफै त लेप्चा बुझ्छु, बोल्नु आउँदैन. कारण मैले सानोदेखि नै बाहिरै हुनु पर्यो. अनि मेरो घरमा प्राय आमा सुब्बा, आपा लाच्छे, भाषै भिन्दै भएर गयो हाम्रो. त्यो चाहिँ आई फिल भेरी सरी that I couldn't learn. स्पिकिङ चाहिँ मलाई भएन, तर ब्लड चाहिँ लेप्चाको छ नै छ. त्यस कारणले गर्दाखेरि आई इन्करेज अदर्स. फादर सामुएल एकदमै इन्टेलेक्चुअल मान्छे भएको हुनाले I used to tell him, Father Samuel, तपाईँले हाम्रो 49 volumes of Naman Tharp is a religious book which resembles the Bible very. त्यसै कारण कालिम्पोङमा बेसी लेप्चाहरू क्रिस्चियन भएको कारण त्यही नै हो किन नमुना र बाइबल रिसेम्बलिङ एकदमै त्यहाँनिर बाइबल जस्तै छ। त्यसले गर्दा अरे बाइबल पनि हाम्रै जस्तो छ त भनेर हामीहरू धेरैजनाहरू चाहिँ यसरी we don't find any that much of difference in lecture religion को आध्यात्मिकता र बाइबल क्रिस्चियनमा त्यति भिन्नता पाउँदैनौँ। त्यही कारणले गर्दाखेरि मैले सोचेँ यति राम्रो कल्चर छ हाम्रोमा 49 volumes स्पिरिचुअलिटी भएको किताब छ भोल्युम्स छ तर यो लेक्चर लाग्दैछ अब यो कसले चाहिँ बाहिर निकाल्दिने कसले इङ्ग्लिसमा ल्याउने कसले नेपालीमा ल्याउने साह्रो परिरहेको थियो। अनि मलाई इन्सपिरेसन भयो फादर सामुएल क्यान यु डु समथिङ तपाईँले यसमा रिसर्च गरिदिनुहोस्। उहाँले ओबिडियन्ट स्पिरिट अफ ओबिडियन्स हि डिड दिस एन्ड उहाँले 49 भोल्युममा गर्नुभएको होइन 49 बाट 3 भोल्युममा उहाँले यो लेख्नु भयो। उहाँलाई 3 वर्ष लाग्यो रिसर्च गर्नु तर I tell you, 5 वर्ष लाग्यो तर I can tell you to the students, Father Samuel, Dr. Samuel has opened a door for you people to explore more and more on this valuable spiritual book called Naman Tharp. तपाईँले रिसर्च गर्दै जानुहोस् अगाडि बाटो खोल्नुहोस् it is in the net वेबसाइटमा खोल्नुहोस् उहाँको थेसिस सबै पाउँछ फिलोसफिकली सबै अनि लेप्चाको स्पिरिचुअलिटी के छ तपाईँले सिकेर अगाडि बढ्न सक्नुहुन्छ। धेरैजनाले किताबहरू लेखेको छ लन्डन युएस सबैजनाले लेप्चाको बारेमा किताब लेखेका छन् तर नम्बर ठाउँमा कसैले पनि लेखेको थिएन। The Father Samuel is the first one to do doctorate in Naman Tharp. So I feel very proud. We have done something. Let's go. So therefore, together with you, I want to thank my priest, Father Samuel, also for working so hard and bringing out something light to the world. Thank you. Now coming to our beloved late Bishop Eric Benjamin, उहाँको बारेमा भोल्युम किताबहरू लेख्न सकिन्छ यसमा पनि रिसर्च गर्न सकिन्छ कारण उहाँको जीवन मेरो what I am going to share with you is my very personal experience with our late Bishop Eric Benjamin. यहाँ मैले एउटा आर्टिकलै लेखेको थिएँ छापिएको छ Bishop Eric Benjamin, a holy pastor. मेरो सानो केटा हुँदादेखिको उहाँको भेटमा विश्वमा चाहिँ मैले यीशु ख्रीष्टको त्यो होलीनेस म पाउँथेँ। I used to feel God coming down to our parish सुरु जस्तो जग्गामा उहाँ आउँदा आनन्दले भरिन्थ्यो खुसी हुन्थ्यौँ आज परमेश्वर आएको छ आज यहाँनिर हाम्रै प्यारिसमा हाम्रै बिचमा भगवान आएको छ यस्तो फिल हुन्थ्यो मलाई। अनि उहाँको जीवन देख्दाखेरि परमेश्वरको शक्तिले भरिएको ज्ञानले भरिएको very intellectual बुद्धिजीवी सबैलाई सम्हाल्न सक्ने ल्याटिन भाषा लेख्नु र बोल्नु सक्ने अनि छर्लङ्ग उहाँले मेसेजहरू दिन सक्नुहुन्थ्यो। एन्ड साथसाथै इन्टेलेक्चुअल मात्रै होइन तर ग्रासरुट लेभलमा पुगेर काम गर्नुहुन्थ्यो। मलाई थाहा छ 1968 त्यो पहिलो जाँदाखेरि त्यति बेला म क्लास 3 मा पढ्थेँ। हाम्रो बारी पनि बर्बाद भएको थियो कालिम्पोङ बर्बाद थियो त्यति बेला यो टिस्टाको बाटोहरू सबै रोकिएको थियो। त्यसपछिको अनिकाल मैले भोगेको छु तर त्यस्तो बाटो नभएको जग्गामा Hardik